The emergency beacon screamed across the galaxy, its red warning light cutting through the peaceful morning on the Galactic Council station. Ambassador Zekhai's forearms trembled as he read the report that had just arrived from Sector 7 Alpha. One human was missing. Just one. To most species in the galaxy, this would barely register as news. A single individual among billions going missing happened every day across thousands of worlds. But Zekhai had been dealing with humans for the past 20 years, and he knew better. He knew that when humans said one of their own was missing, it wasn't a request for help. It was a warning. The missing human was Dr. Sarah Chun, a xenobiologist who had been studying the rare crystal formations on the mining world of Kepler 442b. She had been alone on the planet for 3 months, conducting research that the Galactic Council had specifically requested. The planet was supposed to be uninhabited, a dead rock with valuable minerals and strange crystal formations that seemed to defy known physics. Sarah's last transmission had been routine. She reported finding some unusual energy readings near the northern crystal fields and planned to investigate the next morning. That was 5 days ago. Since then, nothing. Her communication devices were silent, her emergency beacon was offline, and her research station showed no signs of life. The Kepler 442b system was controlled by the Vorthak Empire, a militaristic species that had joined the Galactic Council only 50 years ago. They were proud warriors who valued strength above all else, and had little patience for the soft species that made up most of the council. When the humans had first asked about their missing researcher, the Vorthak response had been dismissive. One small human on a dead world, Commander Thark had said with a dismissive gesture of his clawed hand. Probably fell into a crevice or got lost in a dust storm. We will send a search team when convenient. But the humans weren't satisfied with when convenient. Within hours, they had dispatched their own search vessel, the US Determination. When the Vorthak refused to allow the human ship into their territory, citing security concerns and territorial sovereignty, the situation had escalated quickly. Ambassador Zekhai watched the human representative, Ambassador Catherine Walsh, as she stood before the emergency council session. Her face was calm, but Zekhai had learned to read human micro-expressions over the years. The slight tension around her eyes, the way her hands remained perfectly still at her sides, the measured cadence of her speech, all signs that she was holding back something dangerous. Honored council members, Ambassador Walsh began, her voice carrying easily through the chamber. We are making one final request for cooperation in the search for Dr. Chun. We ask only for permission to conduct a thorough search of Kepler 442b and the surrounding system. Commander Thark rose from his seat, his massive frame casting a shadow across the chamber floor. The Vorthak were impressive specimens, nearly 3 meters tall, covered in thick armored plates that had evolved from their homeworld's harsh environment, and possessed of natural weapons that made them formidable in close combat. The human speaks of cooperation, Thark rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. But her ships already mass at our border. This is not cooperation. This is intimidation. Our ships are there for search and rescue operations, Walsh replied calmly. They will withdraw immediately upon Dr. Chen's safe recovery or upon receiving clear evidence of her fate. And if we refuse your request, Thark's eyes glowed with the challenge. Will you invade Vorthak space for one lost human? The chamber fell silent. Every delegate knew this was the critical moment. The humans had been members of the Galactic Council for less than a century, but in that time, they had earned a reputation that made even the oldest species nervous. They were relentless, unpredictable, and had an unsettling habit of turning impossible situations in their favor. Ambassador Walsh smiled, and Zekhai felt his stomach drop. He had seen that smile before. Commander Thark, she said, her voice still perfectly pleasant. I think there may be some confusion about human intentions. We're not asking permission to search for Dr. Chun. We're informing you that we will be searching for Dr. Chun. The only question is whether this happens with Vorthak cooperation or without it. The chamber erupted in voices as delegates began speaking at once. Some called for calm, others demanded respect for territorial sovereignty, and a few of the more experienced members simply began calculating how long it would take to evacuate their assets from the region. Commander Thark slammed his fist on his speaking podium, sending cracks through the reinforced metal. You dare threaten the Vorthak Empire? We have conquered a dozen systems and crushed 100 rebellions. Your soft species knows nothing of true war. You're absolutely right, Walsh agreed, and her smile grew wider. We know nothing of your kind of war. We fight very differently. The next morning, the first Vorthak patrol ship to investigate the human fleet formations at the border simply vanished. No distress signal, no debris field, no energy signatures. One moment it was there on sensors, the next it was gone as if it had never existed. Commander Thark immediately ordered a full military response. 12 of the Vorthak Empire's finest commanders were assigned to a battle group tasked with driving the human interlopers from Vorthak space. Each commander was a veteran of multiple campaigns, commanding ships that had never known defeat. The first commander to engage the human fleet was Warlord Brektor, whose heavy cruiser Bone Crusher had destroyed more enemy vessels than any other ship in the Vorthak Navy. His tactical record was flawless, his crew was fanatically loyal, and his ship mounted weapons that could crack a planet's crust. Brektor's final transmission was brief and confused. They're not where they should be. How are they not where they should be? All sensors show empty space, but the impacts are real. How are they hitting us through our shields? How are they? Then silence. The second commander, Fleet Captain Gorthak, lasted slightly longer. His transmission included tactical data that made no sense. Enemy ships appear to be in multiple locations simultaneously. Our targeting computers cannot achieve lock. They're firing through our defensive screens as if they weren't there. Our weapons pass through their ships without effect. This is impossible. This is static. One by one, the Vorthak commanders vanished. Some fought for minutes, others for hours, but the result was always the same. The most experienced military leaders of a warrior species, commanding the most advanced warships in their arsenal, simply disappeared into the dark between stars. Back on the council station, Ambassador Walsh received regular updates on the search progress. To anyone watching, she appeared to be conducting normal diplomatic business, reviewing trade agreements, attending committee meetings, discussing environmental protocols with other delegates. She never mentioned the missing Vorthak commanders, never acknowledged the growing panic in the Vorthak delegation. But Zekhai noticed that she had started wearing a small pin on her lapel. It was a simple thing, easily overlooked, a tiny silver star with a human script letter beneath it. When he discreetly researched the symbol, he discovered it was an old Earth military decoration called a gold star, modified with silver and marked with the letter S. According to the database, it was worn by families of military personnel who had died in service. Sarah Chen's family was military. Her father had been a starship captain, her brother was currently serving in the human deep space fleet, and her mother had died in the border conflicts 30 years ago. The pin was Ambassador Walsh's way of saying that Sarah Chun was not just a missing researcher. She was family. On the third day after the commanders started disappearing, the Galactic Council received a message from an unknown source. It bypassed all security protocols and appeared simultaneously on every screen in the station. The message was simple, delivered in a voice that sounded almost human but carried undertones that no human throat could produce. The human female remains alive. She is under our protection now. Those who would harm her have already paid the price. Those who would continue to interfere will pay a greater one. Leave this system. Do not return. The message included coordinates, a location in deep space, far from any star system, where the wreckage of several Vorthak ships drifted in the cosmic dark. But the ships weren't destroyed in any way that Vorthak technology could explain. They were perfectly intact, their hulls unmarked, their systems undamaged. They were simply empty. Not a trace of their crews remained. Commander Thark demanded an explanation from the human delegation, but Ambassador Walsh seemed genuinely puzzled. I'm afraid I don't understand the nature of your complaint, Commander. Our search and rescue operation is proceeding normally. We haven't engaged any Vorthak vessels. 12 of my best commanders are missing. Thark roared. I'm sorry to hear that. Walsh replied with apparent sincerity. Perhaps you should mount a search and rescue operation of your own. I'd be happy to share our search patterns, if that would be helpful. That night, Zekhai found himself unable to sleep. He had served on the Galactic Council for over 40 years, had seen wars start and end, had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. But Something about this situation felt different. There was a pattern here that he was missing, a connection that his mind couldn't quite grasp. He made his way to the station's observation deck, hoping that the sight of the stars might clear his thoughts. He wasn't surprised to find Ambassador Walsh already there, standing at the great transparent wall that looked out into the galaxy. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked quietly. She turned to him with a sad smile. "Sarah's been missing for 8 days now. Sleep feels like giving up." "The message we received today," Zekhai said carefully. "Do you have any idea who sent it?" Walsh was quiet for a long moment, her reflection ghost-like in the transparent wall. "You know, Ambassador, when humans first reached the stars, we thought we were alone. We spent centuries looking for signs of intelligent life, wondering if we were the only ones in the universe capable of thought and feeling and hope. But you weren't alone." "No," she agreed. "We weren't. But we also weren't the first to notice that." She turned to face him fully. "Tell me, Zekhai, in all your years of galactic politics, have you ever wondered why every species that reaches the stars seems to develop along similar lines? Why we all end up with roughly similar technology, similar social structures, similar limitations?" Zekhai felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "I hadn't really considered it." "Sarah had," Walsh said softly. "That's why she was on Kepler 442b. The crystal formations there don't just defy known physics. They predate the formation of the galaxy itself. They're older than any of our species, older than any of our civilizations. And, according to Sarah's research, they're not natural formations." The implications hit Zekhai like a physical blow. "You're suggesting that someone else was here first? Someone who left these artifacts behind?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Walsh replied. "I'm telling you what Sarah discovered. The crystals aren't just old, they're active. They've been monitoring galactic civilization for millions of years, watching, learning, occasionally intervening." "Intervening how?" Walsh's smile was sad and proud at the same time. "Have you ever wondered, Ambassador, why humans are so different from the rest of the galactic community? Why we're so aggressive, so unpredictable, so willing to do the impossible?" Zekhai had wondered exactly that, many times. Most species that reach the stars do so after millennia of gradual development, Walsh continued. They evolve slowly, their technology advances in predictable patterns, their societies develop along well-established paths. But humans, we went from primitive agriculture to faster-than-light travel in less than 10,000 years. We developed technologies that shouldn't be possible with our level of advancement. We've consistently achieved things that every mathematical model says we shouldn't be able to achieve. What are you saying? I'm saying that someone has been watching us, Zekhai. Someone very old and very powerful. And I think Sarah found out who. The next morning brought news that changed everything. A Vorthak merchant vessel had detected strange energy signatures near the abandoned mining station on Kepler 442b. The readings were unlike anything in their databases. Massive power outputs that seemed to pulse in regular patterns, as if something enormous was breathing beneath the planet's surface. Commander Thark was beside himself. His remaining fleet commanders urged caution, pointing out that 12 of their best had already vanished without a trace. But the warrior's pride demanded action. He couldn't accept that his mighty empire was being challenged by a species they had dismissed as weak, and he certainly couldn't tolerate mysterious forces operating in Vorthak territory. Against the advice of his staff, Thark decided to lead the next mission personally. He would take his flagship, the World Breaker, along with 2 full battle squadrons. Whatever was happening on that dead world, he would face it with overwhelming force and Vorthak honor. Ambassador Walsh received the news of Thark's decision while reviewing the latest reports from the human search fleet. Her reaction was not what Zekhai expected. Instead of satisfaction or strategic pleasure, her face showed only deep concern. "He doesn't understand what he's walking into," she said quietly. "None of them do." "Perhaps you could explain it to them," Zekhai suggested. "Share what Dr. Chin discovered." Walsh shook her head. "Even if they would listen, which they won't, how do you explain something like this? How do you tell a proud warrior species that they're about to encounter something so far beyond their understanding that their entire concept of reality might shatter?" Over the next several hours, long-range sensors tracked the Vorthak battle fleet as it moved toward Kepler 442b. The human search vessels withdrew to a safe distance, but they didn't leave the system entirely. They held position just outside the planet's gravity well, their sensors recording everything. The first sign that something was wrong came when the Vorthak fleet's formation began to deteriorate. Ships that had been maintaining perfect military spacing started drifting out of position. Communications became sporadic, with messages arriving minutes after they were supposedly sent, sometimes arriving before they were sent at all. Commander Thark's voice crackled across the communication channels, distorted by interference that no one could explain. Navigation systems are malfunctioning. Stars are not where they should be. Time is moving strangely here. But we will not be deterred. World Breaker will reach the surface. The human ships watched in silence as the Vorthak flagship descended toward the planet. From their vantage point, everything appeared normal. The ship followed a standard atmospheric entry trajectory, its heat shields glowing as it cut through the thin atmosphere toward the mining complex where Sarah Chun had last been seen. But then, the impossible happened. The World Breaker landed successfully. Sensors showed the ship on the surface, powered down and apparently secure. Ground teams deployed, their life signs clear and strong on the monitors. Everything proceeded exactly as it should have, except that at the same time, the World Breaker was still in orbit. Two identical ships, one on the surface and one in space, both reading as completely real on every sensor system. Both crews reported normal conditions and successful mission parameters. Both commanders gave identical orders using Commander Thark's voice and command codes. The orbital World Breaker reported that the surface team had found the mining station abandoned, but intact. Dr. Chin's research equipment was still running, her personal effects undisturbed, her last meal still sitting on the table as if she had just stepped out for a moment. There was no sign of struggle, no indication of what had happened to her. The surface World Breaker reported that they had found strange energy readings coming from beneath the mining complex. Deep penetrating scanners revealed a vast structure buried kilometers below the surface, something that was clearly artificial but older than any known civilization. They were preparing to investigate. Both reports were transmitted simultaneously. Both were verified as authentic by Vorthak security protocols. Both crews confirmed their positions and status. Aboard the human observation vessels, Admiral Sarah Martinez watched the readings with growing unease. She had commanded deep space operations for over 20 years, had seen combat in 3 different war zones, and had personally led the first human expedition beyond the galactic rim. Nothing in her experience had prepared her for this. "Ma'am," her sensor operator reported, his voice tight with confusion. "We're reading quantum interference patterns around the planet. It's like space itself is being folded somehow." "Folded how?" "I'm not sure. The math doesn't make sense. It's as if multiple versions of reality are existing in the same location. The Vorthak ships are real, but they're also not real. They're occupying the same space as themselves, but from different timelines or dimensions." Admiral Martinez had heard Dr. Chin's preliminary reports about the crystal formations on Kepler 442b. Sarah had theorized that the crystals were some kind of multidimensional computing system, capable of processing information across multiple layers of reality simultaneously. But the implications of that theory had seemed too fantastical to take seriously. Now, watching 2 identical Vorthak fleets exist in the same space at the same time, Admiral Martinez was beginning to understand that human concepts of fantastical might not apply here. The situation became even stranger when the surface World Breaker reported discovering an entrance to the underground structure. The readings suggested a vast complex extending deep into the planet's core, with architecture that defied conventional understanding. Corridors that led in impossible directions, chambers that were larger on the inside than the outside, passages that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. And somewhere in that maze, according to the energy signatures they were detecting, something was alive. Something old and vast and utterly alien. Commander Thark, whether the orbital version or the surface version, perhaps both, made the decision to lead an exploration team into the structure personally. His final transmission was brief and filled with wonder. "By the ancestors, it's beautiful. It's like walking through a dream made of starlight and mathematics. I can see everything. I can see all the paths, all the possibilities. I understand now why the human was taken. She wasn't captured. She was invited. Then, both world breakers vanished. Not destroyed, not damaged, simply gone. As if they had never existed at all. The space they had occupied showed nothing but empty vacuum and planetary surface. Every trace of the Vorthak expedition had been erased from reality. But the human sensors had recorded something else. In the moments before the ships disappeared, there had been a brief energy pulse from the planet's surface. The pulse had carried a complex data stream, not random noise, but organized information in a format that no human computer could decode. Admiral Martinez made a decision that would have profound consequences for the future of galactic civilization. Instead of retreating to a safe distance and reporting the situation to Earth Command, she ordered her ships to move closer to the planet. Admiral, her first officer protested. With respect, this is clearly some kind of trap. The Vorthak sent their best commanders, and they all vanished. We should call for reinforcements. Reinforcements won't help here, Martinez replied calmly. Whatever's down, there isn't fighting a war. It's conducting an interview. Ma'am, think about it, Commander. Dr. Chun was a xenobiologist studying alien artifacts. She goes missing near structures that are clearly artificial and incredibly ancient. Then, anyone who comes looking for her with hostile intent simply disappears. But we're not being attacked. We're being evaluated. As if responding to her words, the human fleet received a transmission on the same frequency that had been used for the mysterious message days earlier. But, this time, the voice was unmistakably human. Admiral Martinez, this is Dr. Sarah Chun. I'm safe and unharmed. I know this situation must be confusing, so let me explain as much as I can. The structures beneath this planet are not just ancient. They're the work of the first intelligent species to evolve in this galaxy. They've been watching and guiding galactic civilization for millions of years. The Admiral felt her heart skip a beat. Dr. Chen, what's your status? Where exactly are you? I'm in a place that's difficult to describe using conventional terms. Think of it as existing between dimensions, in the spaces where possibility becomes reality. The beings who built this place, they're still here, in a sense. They've evolved beyond physical form, but they maintain an interest in the development of younger species. The Vorthak commanders who disappeared, what happened to them? There was a pause before Sarah's voice returned, and when she spoke, her tone was sad. They came here with weapons and aggression, expecting to conquer or destroy. They couldn't understand what they were facing, so they were removed from the equation. Not killed, exactly, but relocated to a reality where their actions couldn't cause harm. Admiral Martinez exchanged glances with her senior staff. The implications were staggering. Dr. Chun, are you being held against your will? No, Admiral. I'm here because I chose to be. The beings I've encountered, they've shown me things that challenge every assumption about reality, consciousness, and the nature of existence itself. They've been subtly guiding human development for thousands of years, nudging us toward discoveries that would help us survive in a universe far stranger and more dangerous than we imagined. Why humans specifically? Because we're different, Sarah replied. Most species develop along predictable paths when they reach the stars. They become cautious, conservative, focused on preservation rather than exploration. But humans maintain a quality that the ancient ones find fascinating. We never stop pushing boundaries. We never accept that something is impossible just because it's difficult. The transmission continued for nearly an hour, with Dr. Chin explaining concepts that stretched the limits of human understanding. She described the crystal formations as multidimensional processing nodes, capable of calculating probabilities across infinite potential futures. She spoke of the ancient beings as shepherds of consciousness, working to guide the evolution of intelligence throughout the galaxy. But, most importantly, she revealed why humans had been chosen for special attention. They've been watching our species since we first looked up at the stars, she explained. They saw something in human nature that they hadn't observed in other species, a willingness to sacrifice everything for principles that have no material value. Love, justice, the protection of the innocent. Most galactic species are pragmatic. They make logical decisions based on resource management and survival optimization. But humans will charge into impossible situations to save one person, fight overwhelming odds to protect abstract ideals, sacrificed themselves for concepts like honor and dignity. Admiral Martinez felt a chill of understanding. The missing commanders. You're saying they disappeared because they came here with hostile intent, but humans are different because we came here to rescue you. Exactly. And that difference matters more than you know. The galaxy is about to face a threat that conventional military force cannot defeat. Something is coming from the spaces between galaxies, something that feeds on fear and despair and the logical surrender of hope. When it arrives, the universe will need defenders who are willing to do the impossible, who will fight even when victory seems mathematically impossible. The transmission ended with coordinates, not to Dr. Chen's location, but to a series of hidden installations throughout the galaxy where ancient technology waited to be discovered. Technology that could give humanity the tools they would need for the coming war. The choice is yours, Admiral, Sarah's voice concluded. I can return with you now, and we can pretend this was all some kind of natural phenomenon. Or I can stay here and continue learning, and you can begin preparing our species for what's coming. But understand, if I stay, I won't be the same person when I return. The knowledge I'm gaining changes you in fundamental ways. Admiral Martinez stared at the coordinates glowing on her screen. Each one represented a discovery that could advance human civilization by centuries. But they also represented a responsibility that no one species should have to bear alone. Dr. Chan, she said finally, if you stay, how will we know you're making the right choices? Sarah's laugh carried a warmth that no artificial intelligence could replicate. You won't. That's what makes us human. We never know if we're making the right choices. We just make the best choices we can with the information we have, and we accept the consequences. That's exactly why they think we might be the species that can save the galaxy. 6 months after the incident at Kepler 442b, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session that would reshape interstellar relations forever. The topic wasn't trade disputes or territorial boundaries, but the fundamental question of what humans actually were. Ambassador Zekhai reviewed the reports that had been flooding in from across the galaxy. Human exploration teams had visited each of the coordinates that Dr. Chun had provided, and what they found had sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Ancient installations containing technology that made current galactic civilizations look primitive. Star charts showing the locations of threats that wouldn't arrive for centuries. And, most disturbing of all, detailed records of previous galactic extinctions, civilizations that had risen to greatness only to be consumed by something the records called the hunger between stars. The humans hadn't kept these discoveries secret. Within weeks, they had shared the technology freely with any species willing to help develop defenses against the coming threat. But their generosity came with a price, acceptance that humanity would lead the coordination efforts, not through conquest or political maneuvering, but through the simple acknowledgement that they were the only species the ancient guardians trusted with the full truth. Commander Thark sat in the gallery, no longer a symbol of Vorthak military might, but a living reminder of how quickly overwhelming force could become irrelevant. He and his crews had been returned after 3 months of absence, appearing suddenly, in Vorthak space with no memory of where they had been. Medical examinations showed they were physically unchanged, but psychologically, they were different. The aggressive confidence that had defined Vorthak culture for generations had been replaced by a deep, thoughtful caution. When asked what he remembered of his time in the space between realities, Thark could only say, "We saw ourselves as we truly are. Small, young, foolish, but not without potential for growth." The Vorthak Empire had formally requested to join the human-led defense initiative the following day. Ambassador Walsh stood before the council. Her appearance subtly changed since the crisis began. She wore the same diplomatic attire, maintained the same professional demeanor, but there was something in her eyes that spoke of knowledge gained at a price too high to calculate. "Honored delegates," she began, "I know many of you have concerns about the path we're asking you to walk. You've seen reports of technology that challenges everything you thought you knew about physics. You've heard claims about ancient civilizations and cosmic threats that sound like myths rather than science. I understand your skepticism." The chamber was quieter than Zekhai had ever seen it. Usually, council sessions were filled with the constant murmur of side conversations and political maneuvering. Today, Every delegate was focused entirely on the human ambassador's words. "But I need you to understand something about my species," Walsh continued. "We didn't ask for this responsibility. We didn't seek out the role of galactic defenders. 6 months ago, we were content to be junior members of this council, learning from older civilizations and finding our place among the stars. That changed when one of our own went missing." She paused, and, for a moment, the mask of diplomatic composure slipped. In that brief instant, Zekhai saw the weight she was carrying, the knowledge of what was coming, the burden of trying to prepare an entire galaxy for war against an enemy that most couldn't even comprehend. "Sarah Chun is still on Kepler 442b, Walsh revealed. "She's learning from beings so ancient that they remember when this galaxy was young. The knowledge she's gaining is changing her in ways we can't fully understand. But every few weeks, she sends us reports that advance our understanding of the universe by centuries." She activated a holographic display that showed the latest discoveries from the ancient installations. Weapons that could disrupt matter at the quantum level. Shields that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Most importantly, a communication network that could coordinate defense efforts across the entire galaxy in real time, regardless of the distance involved. "The technology we're sharing isn't ours," Walsh admitted. "We're just the custodians, chosen by intelligence so far beyond us that we can barely comprehend their existence. But we were chosen for a reason, and that reason is becoming clearer every day." The display shifted to show deep space sensor readings from the galactic rim. At first, the data looked like background radiation and cosmic noise. But as the analysis progressed, patterns emerged. Structures moving through intergalactic space, following trajectories that would bring them to the Milky Way within 50 years. "The hunger between stars isn't a natural phenomenon," Walsh explained. "It's a form of life, but one so alien that it challenges our definition of existence. It feeds on consciousness, on the spark that makes intelligent beings more than just complex biological machines. Previous galactic civilizations thought they could fight it with conventional weapons. Their ruins are scattered across a dozen galaxies." A delegate from the Altarian Collective raised her hand. "Ambassador Walsh, if this threat is so overwhelming, why hasn't it already consumed everything? Why does anything still exist?" "Because the ancient guardians have been fighting it for millions of years," Walsh replied. "They've developed strategies that can delay it, deflect it, sometimes even drive it back to the dark between galaxies. But they can't destroy it, and they can't fight it alone anymore. They're too few now, too far evolved beyond physical existence. They need younger species with fresh perspectives and the willingness to try seemingly impossible solutions." The question everyone was thinking came from an unexpected source. The crystalline hierarchy, a species that communicated through harmonic resonances and rarely participated in council debates, spoke through their translation matrix. "Why do the Guardians believe humans are uniquely qualified for this task? What makes your species different from the rest of us?" Walsh smiled, and it was the same expression Zekhai had seen during the crisis, sad, proud, and filled with knowledge that came at too high a price. 3 days ago, we received a report from one of our exploration teams working at the Andromeda installation. They found records of the last galactic civilization to face the hunger, a species called the Valorians who were apparently very similar to current council members. Logical, organized, focused on survival and resource optimization. The hologram showed artistic reconstructions of the Valorian civilization at its height. They had built an empire that spanned most of their galaxy, with technology that surpassed anything the current Galactic Council could achieve. Their cities were marvels of engineering. Their fleets could cross galactic distances in days, and their scientists had unlocked secrets that made faster-than-light travel look primitive. When the hunger arrived in their galaxy, the Valorians made all the logical choices, Walsh continued. They consolidated their resources, withdrew to their most defensible positions, and prepared for a siege that could last millennia. They calculated that by sacrificing the outer rim territories, they could preserve the core worlds long enough to develop new weapons. The reconstruction showed the systematic retreat of Valorian forces, the abandonment of billions of civilians, the gradual collapse of everything they had built in service of a survival strategy that made perfect mathematical sense. The strategy worked for a while. The Valerian core held out for over 2,000 years. Their weapons became more powerful, their defenses more sophisticated. By every logical measure, they were winning the war. Walsh's expression grew darker as the holographic display showed the final stages of the Valerian civilization. But the hunger doesn't just consume matter and energy. It feeds on hope, on the spark that makes life worth living. The Valorians' logical approach to survival eventually stripped away everything that made their civilization worth preserving. In the end, they were so focused on not losing that they forgot what they were fighting for. When the last Valerian city fell, its defenders were technically alive, but no longer truly conscious. They had become biological machines optimized for survival, but incapable of the irrational choices that define true sentience. The chamber fell silent as delegates absorbed the implications. Every species in the Galactic Council was exactly the type that would make the same logical choices the Valorians had made. Humans are different, Walsh said softly. When one of our own goes missing, we don't calculate the resource cost of a rescue operation. We don't weigh the strategic value of a single life against the safety of the many. We send 12 commanders, and when they don't come back, we send 12 more. We keep sending people until everyone comes home, no matter how irrational that choice might seem. Ambassador HFY felt a chill as he realized the deeper truth. The ancient Guardians hadn't chosen humanity despite their irrational behavior. They had chosen them because of it. The installations we've discovered contain weapons and defensive systems beyond our current understanding, Walsh continued. But they also contain something more important: strategic doctrines developed by species that successfully drove back the hunger in previous cycles. Every successful defense had one common element. They were led by species that valued individual consciousness over collective survival. The holographic display shifted to show the latest reports from Dr. Chen. Her physical form was barely recognizable anymore. Her body had adapted to existence in multiple dimensions simultaneously, allowing her to process information that would shatter an unmodified human mind. But her messages still carried the essence of human determination. The enemy we face seeks to reduce all consciousness to its simplest, most efficient form, Walsh read from Sarah's latest transmission. It cannot understand why a species would risk everything to save a single individual, why they would choose hope over logic, why they would fight when mathematics says they should surrender. That incomprehension is our greatest weapon. A new voice entered the chamber, Dr. Sarah Chun herself, speaking through the quantum communication network that connected the ancient installations. Her words carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in dimensions beyond the merely auditory. Honored delegates, this is Dr. Chin speaking from the space between possibilities. I want you to understand what we're asking of you. The coming war will require every species in the galaxy to make choices that defy logic, to commit resources without guarantee of return, to fight for abstract principles that have no material value. Her voice paused, and when it resumed, there was a warmth that even her trans-dimensional transformation couldn't eliminate. But I also want you to know what we're fighting for. I've seen the records of civilizations that successfully defended their galaxies. After the hunger retreated, they didn't just survive, they flourished in ways they never could have imagined. The struggle to maintain consciousness in the face of entropy forces evolution that can't be achieved any other way. The transmission included data packets that would revolutionize every field of science the Council had explored. Medical technology that could extend lifespans indefinitely. Agricultural techniques that could make any world a garden. Energy systems that could power civilizations for millions of years without depleting any natural resources. This is what awaits us if we succeed, Chen's voice concluded. But, more importantly, this is what we become. The ancient Guardians weren't born as multidimensional beings. They evolved to that state through the process of defending consciousness against entropy. They're offering us the same opportunity. The vote that followed was unanimous, though HFY suspected it had less to do with logical analysis and more to do with the influence humans had begun to have on the galaxy. In the 6 months since the Kepler 442b incident, human teams had been working with every major civilization, sharing technology and teaching the seemingly irrational strategies that the ancient archives recommended. But, more importantly, they had been demonstrating what it meant to fight for principles that couldn't be quantified. When a silicate mining operation had trapped workers in a collapsing asteroid, human rescue teams had spent 3 weeks extracting every individual, even when the cost exceeded the economic value of the entire operation. When pirates had threatened a transport convoy carrying refugees from a solar storm, human warships had engaged vessels twice their size to protect civilians they had never met. Each incident had been minor in the context of galactic civilization, but together they had begun to reshape how other species thought about the value of individual consciousness. As the session concluded, Zekhai found himself walking with Ambassador Walsh toward the observation deck, where they had first discussed the implications of Dr. Chen's disappearance. "Do you think we can win?" he asked quietly. Walsh was silent for a long moment, staring out at the stars that would soon become a battlefield for the survival of consciousness itself. "I think we can do something better than win," she said finally. "We can become worthy of the universe we're trying to save. And sometimes, that's enough to change everything." In the months that followed, the galaxy began to change in ways both subtle and profound. The shared technology from the ancient installations advanced every civilization by centuries, but, more importantly, the knowledge of what was coming began to reshape cultures throughout the galaxy. Species that had been logical and cautious for millennia began to embrace the human concept of fighting for principles that couldn't be measured. The Vorthak Empire restructured their military around the protection of individual consciousness rather than territorial conquest. The crystalline hierarchy developed new harmonic patterns that celebrated individual achievement rather than collective efficiency. And, on Kepler 442b, Dr. Sarah Chun continued her transformation, becoming something that was no longer entirely human but had never forgotten what it meant to be human. Her reports grew stranger with each transmission, filled with concepts that challenged the foundations of reality itself. But they also carried a consistent message. The galaxy was preparing for war against an enemy that had never faced a defense based on irrational hope rather than logical strategy. For the first time in cosmic history, the hunger between stars was approaching a galaxy that was ready to fight not just for survival, but for the abstract principle that consciousness, individual, unique, impossibly precious consciousness, was worth any price. The war would be unlike anything the universe had ever seen. And humanity, the species that went looking for one missing researcher and found an ancient conspiracy to save the galaxy, would lead the defense not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through the simple recognition that sometimes the most logical choice is to ignore logic entirely. The first human had gone missing, and, in trying to find her, they had discovered their true purpose among the stars.